when you're working with students now, what are the goals that you're going for in terms of their becoming a great clarinetist? What kinds of things are you thinking about in terms of shaping their sound and just the way they play, their approach to the music, everything? Can you talk about your big ideas that you work on with them?
First, you have to start off with a great sound concept. So I have recordings of great clarinet players. Robert Marcel is my teacher, his teacher, Daniel Bonad, his colleague, Ralph McLean, just the best in the world. And so you really go for trying to explain exactly what a great sound really sounds like. And I work on very careful warm-ups and just to strengthen fundamentals of embouchure and finger technique. Because finger technique is a big part of the French school, and that's a large sort of idea where a lot of French etudes require a great deal of finger technique and totally at the service of large romantic phrases. So you have to have it's sort of the ultimate in refinement where you have the technique and you don't display it. You know, it just
yeah.
So yeah, that's a big part of the idea. And the finger technique, it sort of, you don't really want to tell the audience how the clarinet changes notes. You don't want to hear any finger noises. You just want to hear the melody changing. And the other thing is not to treat the clarinet as an instrument, but as a voice. So, you know, I listen to a lot of opera, favorite singers, and you know, great singers can just stay on a certain note and add momentum to the note or slow down on a note just by tone color. So the idea of teaching tone color and use of rubato and phrasing and all that stuff is, I think, pretty crucial to.
Yeah. Are there some problems when you hear kids play that are more prevalent than others? I mean,
yeah, they always bite too much. There's always too much pressure here on the reed.
And is that just in general with all the students that you hear for the first time, there's just generally too much biting on clarinet?
Yeah, I think so, because if they're not told, not all the time, of course, you get an exceptional kid, but most of the time they're not taught that there are muscles here. They're just taught that the lip is something to fold over the bottom teeth and chomp down.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell me more about how you talk about the muscles down here?
Sure. The upper lip should be pushing down on the mouthpiece and in to help the corners in, because the mouth has a weakness because it's horizontal, and the bore of the clarinet, which it should try to mimic, is circular. So the weaknesses are the corners. So they have to be pinched and pushed inwards. And the muscles up here, as I said, you push down on the mouthpiece to try to reduce the bite between the bottom and upper teeth. And also, the secret, of course, is in the bottom lip. The muscles here aren't really connected to any tendons and bones. They're free, floating. They're connected to each other. And so what you try to do is push them together so they can work in concert to create a pad, a springy pad for the reed, and to protect it from the biting part of the bottom teeth.
So are there, when you're talking to kids about that, are there syllables that you talk to them about, or shapes, or could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, you try to make an ooh with your lips, and that pushes in the corners and pushes the muscles together. And then we get into the inside of the mouth, which is another kettle of fish. And actually the best syllable is the French diphthong EU, which is E. And that raises the back of the throat, and it also raises the surface of the tongue so that you create sort of a pathway, which is kind of a reverse or a funnel. effect, where you keep the passageway open from the lungs through the throat and the back of the mouth, and then narrow it down and focus it towards the tip of the reed by raising the tongue.
So can we talk a little bit more about that kettle of fish, about what's going on
Yeah.
inside the mouth? So as you describe tongue placement inside the mouth, what is it that you're trying to get students to do exactly with the way their tongue is placed?
I'm trying to create an air seal between the surface of the tongue and the roof of your mouth. And you do that by pushing the tongue in between the molars, top molars. And so the air doesn't get a chance to, blow up the cheeks or go into the side of the reed. You want to be efficient with the air, so you don't want the air to be going along the sides of the reed. You want it to be aimed right at the tip of the reed. Tip of the reed is obviously the thinnest part of the reed, and that's what responds the best to air current. So you try to direct it right there. You want the tongue to be right about like this, so that it is able to articulate when it needs to.
Yeah.
Right there with the top corner of the tongue just below the tip of the reed. A lot of people say tip to tip, and of course there's a problem with that, because first of all the tip is too flexible and you get too hard in articulation, but most of all you're aiming the air above the tip of the reed, and so you don't get the same sort of resonance.
Yeah. So where can you describe where on the tongue it's touching the molars in the back?
Well, I'd say every mouth is different.
Yeah, sure.
But what I do is I guess I touch starting at the second molars on the top, and I go to almost where the eye teeth are.
And that's the funnel that you're talking about. That's sort of creating that funnel there. That's moving toward the tip of the reed.
Yeah. And the tip curves downwards. So because the roof of the mouth curves downwards as well, so you want to conform to that.
Yeah. Are there indicators of that in the sound? So when you know that's working correctly, there are things about the sound that let you know that tongue is in the right place. Could you describe some of those?
Yeah, you can actually hear ah and e. I can demonstrate.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Just is ah, is e. With ah, you don't really get the overtones. When you get e, you can hear.
Yeah, yeah. So are those the kinds of things that you ask students to listen for when they're practicing and they're trying to make the sounds you're trying to get them to work on?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't know whether specifically, an advanced student can pick out the overtones maybe, but if you can't do that, at least you can kind of, I tell my students to kind of make she, and when you do that, that kind of puts your tongue in about the right position. And at least you can tell that it's more resonant and has more openness and vibrancy.
And that syllable, that she idea, works in concert with the e idea about where your tongue is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're setting people up to do that, are there notes that are better to listen for that on than others?
Sure. Lower register, C or B flat are probably the best. Really.
Because I know that when you look at a lot of beginning books, clarinets are starting on open G and this E and up in very short tube fingerings, and so you're suggesting, if I'm understanding you correctly, that working with longer fingerings are better indicators of that sound quality.
Well, somewhat longer, yeah. If you're just working on sound, they're teaching the fingers, of course.
Right.
That's why they do that.
Yeah.
But the throat register, open G, is very, very volatile, and it's too hard, I think.
Yeah.
So try to find a sound there.
Not the happiest clarinet place to play. Yeah, right.
And the other thing is how they teach upper register. They try to go right up to B. B's the hardest thing to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody winds up biting, they wind up pressing the clarinet just to try to get the doggone note to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just not covering the holes. It's nothing to do with them, but they wreck a lot of people's embouchures just trying to get that note out.
Uh-huh.
And it's much better just to get a lower register note and then just pop the register key.
Yeah.
That'll get you into the upper register.
Yeah, rather than trying to work by scale up
Yeah.
through it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, you mentioned a few minutes ago about some basic exercises that you do to sort of get going and get
Mhm.
started with all this. Could you play some of those? And just...
Well, there's a warm-up book called the Vade-Mecum, Paul Jean-Jean, which is he was a French conservatory guy.
Huh?
And what I like about it, it's unremarkable, but it's very clever. It starts at the lowest reaches of the horn, and what you do is you create a situation where you're just moving one or two fingers, and you start way down the lower register, which requires no real effort here, and it allows you to sort of wake up your embouchure in a healthy sort of way. If you wake it up by doing scales or long tones especially, I feel like long tones create a great deal of tension in your embouchure because you're listening and you're saying, how can I make this better? And you start to mess with your embouchure. And there's so much kind of isometric stuff going on in the embouchure anyway, that when you try to upset the balance, it upsets the balance when you try to alter it while you're playing.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's already too late, I think, to try to change it. So anyway, and it goes on in every semitone. And those little crescendo diminuendos are also very important because it gets your phrasing and your control of the air and the airspeed working. As they're playing this, you can listen to the sound and you can see what's happening. It's great because you can mention the fingers or mention the sound, and it's not in the context of an etude or in the context of a solo where there's a million other things going on.
Right, sure.
So,
Sure.
So it's a great sort of way to micromanage the fundamentals.
Yeah.